There are so many bands that I have been loving and following ever since I was in high school. And now that I am 24, I am still listening to these bands. And what is something that all of these bands have in common? I think they are still so highly underrated and underappreciated. So, in today's episode, I want to shine some light on some bands that are some of my personal favorites and at least by my definition, I think that they are highly underrated. These are artists that I really feel haven't received much recognition and haven't gotten their flowers, so to speak, and maybe have more of a niche cult following, but are still bands that I think are so worthy of love and appreciation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Pretty in Punk, the punk rock podcast. I'm your host, Fiona, your girly girl guide to the world of punk, rock, and everything in between. And I've picked out 4 bands that I have loved since high school, so probably about 10 years now, that I think deserve more recognition and are so highly underrated, and I can't wait to share them all with you. Even though I have loved these bands since high school, these are bands that I truly find myself still coming back to and am always wondering, why have they not received more love yet? So we are going to dive into these bands deeper today. This is all opinions based, like I'm basing this all off of opinions and observations why I think and believe these bands to be underrated, and if you disagree, let me know because I'm curious, but this is all opinion. I want to start off with a band that really, for me, defined high school, and that is FIDLAR. I used to write their name all over my school books, and thank God my teachers in high school didn't know what that stood for, because FIDLAR does stand for F it dog, life's a risk. So thankfully, my teachers were none the wiser and didn't pick up on the fact that I did have profanity technically on my binders and textbooks and stuff. But FIDLAR is one of those bands that really defined my high school experience, and I can't imagine their music without it, and even my college years, honestly. And finally, at age 24, I did get to see them live, and it was like a full circle moment for me after loving them for nearly 10 years now. But I still feel like they are massively underappreciated and underrated. So let's dive into it. First, a little bit of background. FIDLAR was formed in 2009 in LA when frontman Zach Carper met former guitarist Elvis while working at a recording studio. In an interview with Zach Carper, he actually says that I was working at a recording studio. I was the engineer for a producer and Elvis was an intern. We drank Sparks and jammed for 3 hours straight, and then we started recording songs when the studio was empty. We posted them online and people started liking it. It was more of a studio thing, to tell you the truth. We were just effing around in the recording studio, and then we got a show and we were like, we need a band. My roommate Brandon was a bass player in another band, and Max and Elvis are brothers and he plays drums, so it just kind of works out. As of now, Elvis is no longer with the band, but the members now are Zach on vocals and guitar, Brandon on bass and vocals as well, and Max, who is on drums. There are also touring members as well. And back when Elvis was in the band, he and Zach would kind of switch on and off in vocals. Brandon has a song in there as well. I would describe their sound as elements of punk, skate punk, surf punk, those kind of subgenres in there. You can most definitely hear the California influence in there. And a lot of their work does reflect themes of like substance abuse, skateboarding, surfing, and even fake IDs, as well as subjects like overdosing and anxiety. They really get into some heavy topics in there. But why is it that FIDLAR is so underrated? I would say, number one, they don't really fit that mainstream mold. I mean, they lean heavily into like the skate punk and garage rock kind of genres, and that isn't something that is often seen in the mainstream. They have a very DIY sort of vibe to them, even though, yes, their latest album, Surviving the Dream, is definitely highly produced. A lot of their earliest work is just so DIY, has that lo-fi kind of sound, and they're very raw and rugged attitude. While yes, it is beloved by fans, it's not something that like a bigger radio station or mainstream media is going to pick up on. Number two, they're wildly and unapologetically honest. Their lyrics are super raw and unfiltered. I mean, especially on their earliest work, I would say, too. Definitely on their self-titled album and to their sophomore album. I mean, even still today, they're just not afraid to say what they want to say. But there are so many songs that talk about partying, addiction, mental health, and honestly, just even being a mess in your 20s. They're very vulnerable, and that vulnerability definitely resonates with their hardcore fans, but maybe for a casual listener, that's not always what they're looking for, right? However, what I love about them is that they're not trying to be polished, they're just real. I think another reason why FIDLAR could be so underrated is that after 2, their sophomore album, they took a bit of a break. So 2 came out in 2015, but their next release wasn't until 2019, and they kind of slowed down a bit after that and were pretty quiet. And in the music world, no matter your genre, disappearing for a bit, it can cause people to move on and seek out more new music. Even if your music is so good, people will be discovering something new. Another reason why I think they may be so underrated is that a lot of people don't realize how great their energy is live. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are so many hard hitting songs in their discography, but nothing compares to their live energy. And if you don't go out of their way to see them live, you're not going to get that raw, unfiltered punk energy that they really do have. I saw them back in October of 2024 in Philly. Absolutely loved that show, and I can really attest to this because I didn't love Surviving the Dream until I heard it live, and then once I heard them playing the songs off of that album live, I had a whole new appreciation for it, and I felt as if their energy was better live than it was on that album. So I think that's definitely a reason why they could be so underrated, is because people aren't going to go out of their way to see you live if they aren't like hardcore listeners to their music. And lastly, why I would say they're underrated is because I just don't think they care about being famous. I think they just care about making music and doing it because they want to do it. I mean, I think that's part of the charm of bands in this genre and bands that are more quote unquote underground, so to speak. I will say though, I remember maybe back in 2020, their song Sober did go pretty viral on TikTok, which is crazy because I remember listening to that song when I was like 14 or 15, and I was like, how is this just like coming out of the woodwork all of a sudden? But they aren't the kind of band that is constantly like pushing their social media presence. And I think that is a huge factor as to why so many bands and artists are blowing up nowadays, is because of their social media presence on TikTok and pushing their music every day and making up dances to their music. But they're not the kind of band that you're going to make up a TikTok dance to, right? So I guess I could say these are the reasons why they are so underrated. And don't get me wrong, I love FIDLAR. This is in no way to dig at them at all. Let me be so clear about that. These are just, after kind of like thinking about it, digging deeper into their discography and their history, these are some reasons why I think they are often overshadowed and underappreciated. And I think it makes sense. But all in all, no matter what, no matter if they took a break or if they don't have the biggest social media presence, I love them and their discography has such a huge place in my heart. So, all that being said, what are some of my favorite songs? Personally, I am a bigger fan of their older work. My top 2 favorite albums are their first release, their self-titled release, FIDLAR, and then 2, their sophomore album spelled TOO. I mean, those were the 2 albums that were out when I first started listening to them back in 2015. So, they just really do have a special place in my heart. I mean, when I listen to 2, I am transported back to like sophomore or junior year of high school when my music taste really started evolving. I would say that my favorite songs, first of all, my favorite song by them is Crackhead Ted. 1000%. I love that song so much, and that is probably one of their most underrated songs. They only just put it on streaming recently. I used to listen to it on SoundCloud and YouTube, okay? By saying they only just put it on streaming, I mean like Spotify, Apple Music. Cheap Beer, of course. I know it's one of their most popular ones, but it's popular for a reason. That song rips. It's so good. I also love Wait for the Man, Punks, and Drone. Those are just a few of my personal favorites. And if you want to get into this band, I would say start with their self-titled. I think that is the most raw and real FIDLAR. And if you also are a fan of FIDLAR, let me know in a comment below and let me know maybe why you think they're underrated. I want to hear from you. And do you agree? Are they underrated? So that's all for FIDLAR, but next up is a band that I think is even more underrated than FIDLAR and really does not get enough love. and that is Bass Drum of Death. I have loved this band for years. I think I discovered them about like senior year of high school, so this was a little later on than I discovered FIDLAR and some other bands that will be on this list, but Bass Drum of Death just really, I am shocked that they haven't had more recognition. So, Bass Drum of Death, they are kind of like a garage punk, I would say, band from Mississippi. And John Barrett, the frontman and the creator of the band, he formed it in 2008 as a one-man band kind of solo project deal. And I'm pretty sure the first two albums he did record by himself. This truly is one of those bands that I do not think has received their flowers yet. They only have 123,000 monthly listeners, which is crazy. They need more. They need more recognition. I've loved this band for so long and it's just crazy to me. So why is it? Why is it that they're so underrated? Number one, they kind of stay true to the grit. I think like FIDLAR in their earlier work, Bass Drum of Death is just raw as hell. Okay. They're not focused on like the frills of it all. The music is loud and it's very fuzzy. It's very fuzzed out garage rock. Definitely no frills, as I said. But that's exactly what makes them so good and so unique. I think they have a very unique and a very distinct sound. And it's just like, when you hear a Bass Drum of Death song, you know it's them. But I think living in a music world that is so obsessed with an overproduced sound, a band like this isn't going to receive mainstream attention, or not even mainstream, just in the world of rock, punk, garage rock, etc., etc. Unfortunately, their gritty sound just isn't what gets onto playlists on Spotify or on the radio. I mean, they're all over my playlist, but you know, is what it is. I would say also too, just based off of observation, there are a lot of bands that I follow that have, like FIDLAR, had a song go super viral on TikTok, but they've never had a moment like that that has really put them on a map and exposed them to even new fans. And I'm not saying that that is what makes a band great, is going viral on TikTok, right? I mean, especially in the world of punk, in the underground music scene, I'm not saying that that is like what you need to succeed, but it's just interesting when I was comparing earlier in the podcast how FIDLAR did have a song that went viral on TikTok. They haven't had a moment like that. So I feel like unless you're looking for them, you're not going to find them. They're kind of, I would say that they're one of those bands that people stumble upon and then fall in love with, kind of like how I did. I just randomly found them on Spotify like 8 or 9 years ago now, and they've really stuck with me and I still listen to them to this day. Like truly, they are the band that you find and then you're like, why is no one else talking about this band? Also true, they do have more quote unquote small town roots. I mean, coming out of Mississippi instead of like LA or New York, they don't benefit from the same kind of industry attention as other bands in their kind of realm would get. However, I do think that also gives them an edge and an upper hand as an outsider. So people will be like, oh, they're from Mississippi, let's check them out. However, they just keep delivering and delivering the best tracks. I mean, every album has such good tracks on it. Their whole discography is full of gems, whether it's like Get Found or Crawling After You or even Nerve Jamming. I mean, they consistently put out these really, really good, like punchy, high energy tracks that really keep me coming back. I think because they are so consistent with their sound and they haven't really like pop-ified their sound, I think people take them for granted. They are so good and so often overlooked. All in all, though, I think Bass Drum of Death is kind of for the people who love that no frills kind of sound and they're looking for the real deal with no gloss and no frills. They don't really chase the trends. They're not looking for mainstream approval. They're just making this music that is what they want to make and is so freaking good, okay? Some of my favorite songs and albums. So honestly, I love most of their albums. Say I Won't is probably my least favorite only because I haven't listened to it the most, but not because it's bad by any means. But GB City and Rip This are definitely my top two. My favorite songs are GB City, Get Found, Velvet Itch, High School Roaches, Heart Attack Kid, For Blood, Black Don't Glow, and Lose My Mind, and Such a Bore, actually, too. That's a good one, but I think to get into them, I would start with GB City. Already, I listed like well over half of GB City, and that is my favorite album by them by far. I would say it's a no skip album for me. You guys know I love a no skips album, so I would say that's definitely a no skips album for me. All in all, if you love Bass Drum of Death, please let me know. I love them and I wish that they would get more recognition. And let me know again, why do you think they're underrated or not underrated? So let me know what you think. Anyway, enough of Bass Drum of Death. Let's get into Wavves, a band that truly defined me in high school. They're like neck and neck with FIDLAR and Wavves. This is another band. I was writing their band name all over my textbooks and my notebooks in high school. You're probably like, that's really weird and embarrassing. I really don't care. But it's true. That's what I would do because when I was in high school, I would have like one earbud in and people wouldn't be able to see it. And I would just be like thinking about all the bands I loved and like writing them on my notebook. So, it's who I was in high school. I wasn't very cool, but it's fine. That's in the past. Anyway, so Wavves was formed in 2008 by Nathan Williams. It started off as this like solo recording project of his back in 2008 where he released several 7 inches as well as cassettes. Now, although Wavves has had some pretty cool moments in their career, I mean, Nine is God was featured in GTA, so that is pretty cool. And okay, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm making this up. I do believe that one of their songs was featured in Jersey Shore because I swear my friend and I were watching it and she and I were like, is that Wavves in the background? So I'm pretty sure a song was featured on Jersey Shore. But number one, I feel like Wavves was kind of ahead of the curve, right? So back in 2008 to 2010-ish, Wavves kind of helped shape that like hazy surf punk meets noise kind of rock aesthetic that a lot of other bands later on had kind of taken inspiration from. I mean, back in 2010, King of the Beach, it hit the scene kind of before that like lo-fi garage wave really exploded. So in a way, I do say that Wavves are kind of pioneers of this kind of subgenre, and there were others that unfortunately did it later on and just gained more traction. Number two, I would say that Wavves sound from the beginning, from this very noisy, hazy, as I said before, very, very DIY sound, their sound evolved, and I don't think everyone kept up. So, early Wavves, it was noisy, it was chaotic, and even kind of like messy on purpose, I guess you could say. And then King of the Beach came along, it was catchier, it was more polished, it was super melodic, super catchy, and had these hooks that really get stuck in your head. And taking it all the way to 2017 with You're Welcome, that has some songs that could definitely lead into a more like mainstream kind of sound with some even quote unquote poppy sounding hooks. And some fans just weren't leaning into that much cleaner and mainstream sounding direction. But then some listeners who discovered them later on maybe weren't into the whole King of the Beach era and weren't into that noisy era of Wavves. I feel like they were kind of caught in between these two scenes and their sound has really evolved with the time. Personally, I'm into their whole discography, but I could see why some people would definitely prefer one over the other. And I think that could be why they are a little bit more underrated because some people may favor earlier work versus later work and vice versa. Now, all that being said, another reason why I do think they are pretty underrated is that they got to a point where they were getting big and then got totally slept on again. So they had some major label attention in 2015 with their release 5, or it is stylized as V, the Roman numeral 45, and crossovers with bands like Cloud Nothings, for example. I remember seeing people that I didn't even know listened to Wavves posting songs on their Instagram stories and being like, oh, like, no way. They're really gaining traction. And I started to hear their songs everywhere. I remember, don't come for me, I was in a Hot Topic one time in college and I saw one of their music videos playing. I believe it was for Way Too Much. And I saw it playing. I've heard their songs playing like before a band comes on when I'm at a concert. So they're definitely like, they're a known name in the scene, but they never got to like that festival headliner level. And I think when they never exploded, people kind of forgot and took a step back. Does that make sense? They never stopped making great stuff. I mean, You're Welcome and Hideaway, they're full of these hidden gems. There are a lot of songs I really do love off of You're Welcome. Hideaway I haven't listened to as much as their other albums in their discography, but I feel like that kind of makes sense. I mean, they got to this point where they were getting a lot of traction, but then it kind of just got to a point where it stopped. However, I believe that Wavves plays this very pivotal role in this like indie punk, surf rock kind of genre of the modern age. And Wavves has always just kind of been doing their own like unapologetic thing. And they have a world of underappreciated hits out there. And so, that being said, a few of my favorite songs and albums, my top two albums from them are King of the Beach and Afraid of Heights. These are the two albums that when I was like writing their band name on my binders and my notebooks in high school, these are the two albums that were blasting in my ears. But I will say, I also love Five. There are some great songs on there. That is when they kind of started leaning into that like mainstream quote unquote rock sound, but there are some really good songs on there, but it still kind of has that like noisy fuzzy sound to it as well. And then You're Welcome has some underrated songs on there as well. So all in all, I love Wavves. I know that they're going on tour again. My friend just got tickets to see them. I'm really hoping I can see them, but they're touring with Beach Goons as well, which is another one of my favorite bands, and one that I almost made the list, but I decided to go with some others on this list. However, I do recommend, if you want to get into them, start with King of the Beach. I think that that is quintessential Wavves, and you really get a feel for their no frills kind of sound mixed with their surf rock and surf punk elements, and I think you get a really good feel of who they are on that album. So, lastly, I want to get into another band, another one of my favorite high school bands. That's like the theme of this episode. Underrated high school bands that Fiona loves. Lastly is Together Pangea. I adore this band. So Together Pangea is another one of those California-based bands. I definitely have a love for bands from California. I would say I just am very drawn to that sound. So the band formed in 2009 when friends William and Danny met their future drummer Eric at Cal Arts. They began playing shows on campus and eventually at many local venues as well, and it became something bigger, and eventually Together Pangea was the Together Pangea that we know and love today. However, their name used to be Pangea, but apparently they were forced to change it. I'm not sure of the reasoning of that. If anyone knows, let me know. But why is Together Pangea so underrated? Because I mean, their album Battle is a hard-hitting album from beginning to end, and that was actually one of my no skip albums on my no skip albums episode. But number one, I mean, they have like these hooks for days, okay? They have this perfect mix of grungy guitars, but also pure melody. They have hooks that really get stuck in your head, especially with songs like the album's namesake, Badillac, or songs like Friend of Nothing. They're so catchy. So it's just, I wonder why they are still so underrated. However, there are other songs like Sick Shit that, I mean, from the first lyric, you're like taken aback by it. So, you know, I could see why songs like that aren't gaining mainstream attention, even though they are so beloved by the fans. I feel like they just never blew up, but they should have. They had everything going right. I mean, they have the sound and they have the energy, they have a unique vibe to them, but they never were the kind of band that got like a really good festival placement or had like a huge breakout into the mainstream. I feel like they're always kind of like on the edge of blowing up, but have like somewhat stayed with like that cult following. Also, speaking of the album Battlelock, my all-time favorite of theirs, it's raw and it's wild, but it's also emotional. It has this very emotional side to it. There's heartbreak, confusion, and anger all wrapped into one with these distorted guitars and shouted vocals. It's a very human, raw album, which hits different if it's not something that you're used to. All in all, I feel like with Together Pangea, I don't have much more to say on them. I mean, they are so insanely underrated. I mean, it's surprising to me that Badillac isn't way more of a well-known album. It's incredible. It's an album that I keep coming back to even now at age 24 versus when I was 14. I mean, Badillac is one of the albums, like all of these artists on this list, these are artists that I keep coming back to, and I feel like Badillac is number one on that list, and every time I listen to it, I'm like, it's just so underappreciated. It's a great album. From the opening track, oh my God, Alive just hits, and then it runs into Make Myself True, and it's like, it's just a perfectly placed album. All of the songs are incredible, and there's some underrated songs on that album as well, and their whole discography is full of hidden gems. And I feel like if this is the kind of genre that you're craving, they're like essential listening, and it just amazes me that they have not been more widely recognized. I think you can probably tell Battle Act is my favorite album, so I will say if you want to get into Together Pangea, start with that album. It's so good. However, Bulls and Roosters is really, really good too. I mean, Friend of Nothing is on that one, which I love. There's a song called Make Me Feel Weird, which I love. There's also My Head is Sick, which is one of my favorites. I mean, their discography really runs deep, and you will find a song that you like, whether it is some of their newer material, their acoustic material, or some of their really DIY deep cuts. So, all of that being said, I want to know, if they're not mentioned in this video, who is your favorite underrated band and why do you think they're so underrated? Again, this was all just from my experience growing up listening to these bands and seeing them never receiving the love that they deserve. This is my opinion on why I think these bands are so underrated, and I want to hear from you. If you want to maybe expand on one of these bands, let me know what you think, why they're underrated, or what you love about one of these bands, or let me know your favorite underrated band. I would love to know. Again, these are all bands that I grew up loving and listening to and just constantly coming back to and being like, why don't more people love these bands? So, all of that being said, that is all for today's episode, but thank you so much for listening or watching. You can find me and follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Pretty and Punk Pod. I post short clips over there. I'm definitely more active on TikTok than I am on Instagram, so I recommend following me on there. And if you want to listen to the podcast, I'm available on Spotify, Apple Music, all of the usual streaming platforms. If you have a streaming platform, I am on it. And I do also post video episodes on YouTube if you do prefer to watch on video. Sometimes I prefer to put on a podcast on video, so totally get it. But I do post new episodes every single Friday, so be sure to subscribe or follow along, and I will see you in the next episode next Friday.